So I want to just give you a few quick pointers about the macro or general environment of the organisation and why it's important when we're thinking strategically and when we're trying to act entrepreneurially that we have a really clear understanding of what are the major trends or factors that are going to impact upon us from the external environment. Now, I want to start off by talking about where the idea of external analysis comes from. The idea of external analysis is driven by a model of strategic management called the IO, or Industrial Organisation Model. And this model was popularised by one of the world's leading strategic thinkers and writers, a guy called Michael Porter, back in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And the model actually comes out of economics originally. So there's a school of economics called industrial organisation. And basically what this model says is that when we look for the source of advantage for organisations, it's not the unique resources or capabilities they possess as an organisation that's important. What is important is the market or the industry in which they compete in and their position within that industry. So the IO model is an externally focused model. It says that the performance of our organisation, our strategy, the opportunities that we can take advantage of, is really informed and influenced by the market conditions in which we compete. And in particular, it focuses on a couple of key issues that we might want to think about in terms of how that industry operates. So whether the industry requires economies of scale to be competitive, or whether you can produce in large volume or small volume. What are the barriers to market entry? Is it easy for other firms to get into the industry, or is it difficult for other firms to get into the industry? What is the degree to which there's product diversification in the marketplace, and how different are those products? And how concentrated are firms in the industry? And these factors are what tend to impact upon our decisions as an organisation, the strategies that we might take. And so the IO model says we should start, whenever we're planning our strategy, whenever we're looking for opportunities, we should start outside the organisation. And there are really four key assumptions that drive the IO model. The first is that the external environment imposes pressures and constraints on our strategy. So really the context we compete in is what shapes our strategy, not the unique resources and capabilities we possess as an organisation. It says that, or believes that, most firms competing in an industry are relatively similar when it comes to their strategically relevant resources. Now, of course, remember that this model does come out of economics, and so one of the common assumptions of economics, in particular markets where there's pure competition, is that firms are very similar and very equally balanced. And so therefore the IO model assumes that when we look at firms, they're relatively the same, so any uniqueness in performance can't be linked to the unique characteristics of that organisation. Now again, we know that that's a little bit of a furphy, because we do know that there are differences between firms. Even if we looked at, say, the four big banks in Australia, while on the surface they appear to be relatively similar, there are some substantial differences in the behaviours and activities of those four organisations. The IO model also assumes that resources are highly mobile. If we identify that we need a particular resource, whether it's money, whether it's a human capability, whether it's access to a market, we can simply purchase that. And that resource can move freely and easily to our organisation at any time we might choose. And the fourth thing it says is that organisational decision makers are rational actors. They always make decisions that are in the best interest of the organisation. Now again, we might question this. Rationality is one of those areas that is very much contested within economics these days. And I think we would say that we do observe irrational behaviours within managers, but overall their focus as a manager of an organisation is to maximise profit. And so because of these assumptions, the IO model says that whenever we're starting to think about our strategy, we really need to start with the external environment. And when we think about the external environment, we need to talk about the general environment, which is the bit that we're going to talk about now, the industry environment and the competitor environment. What we do is we look at those environments and we try and work out how attractive an industry is. Is this an industry that we should be looking to compete in, and how should we compete there? Once we've worked out whether it's attractive and what our strategy might be, then we try and acquire the assets and skills that we need to effectively compete within that industry, and then we go about implementing our strategy. So the IO model is very much informed by these external factors and driven by external forces that might shape the organisation. So when we talk about environmental analysis, when we talk about looking at the environment around us, and certainly looking at the external environment, we need to look at three areas. We need to look at the general environment. Okay, so the general environment are the broad set of macro environmental factors that impact upon all organisations, not just our business. We need to think about the industry environment. We need to think about the 5 forces that operate within that industry. And if you look at the second part of this lecture, what you'll see is a section on industry analysis, and again a model that was developed by Michael Porter, which gives us a very handy tool for assessing how we might understand an industry. And we also need to think about our competitors. Who are our current competitors and what are our competitors' strategies? And so when we look at our external environment, we see that this external environment is made up of all of these particular parts. So when we're engaged in environmental scanning and when we're looking at strategic analysis, the first thing we need to do is look at our general environment. Now, the general environment is sometimes referred to as the broad environment or the macro environment. It's the sort of broad forces that impact upon all businesses and all of society, and therefore filter down to have an impact upon our business. And really what you're doing here is you're looking for future trends. You're looking for changes that might happen in society and industry that may have a positive or a detrimental effect for your organisation. And just as a frame of reference, when we're looking at the general environment, we want to look at a number of particular areas within that general environment. So we want to sort of pay attention to sort of 6 key areas where we might see trends or changes that do have an impact upon our organisation. And so the sort of areas we look at when we do environmental analysis are demographics, economic factors, political legal factors, socio-cultural factors, technological factors and global factors. Now, these are just descriptors, they're top-line descriptors. You might look at other frames to have a look at the external environment. The point is that it's trying to indicate you the sort of areas where you might see changes that impact upon your strategy. So for example, in terms of demographics, if you look at a market like Australia or China, what we see is that we have a rapidly ageing population. That's a significant demographic change. Now we know that age is a predictor of some of the purchases that people might make. And so if we see a change in the demographic profile of our market, that's going to necessitate a change of our strategy. And from an entrepreneurial perspective, it might open up new market opportunities. Similarly, we might be interested in socio-cultural change. You know, socio-cultural change is linked to the norms and behaviours that we see within our society. And as a culture and a society changes, we need to make sure that we offer market products that reflect those socio-cultural values. Similarly with technology, as technology changes, it opens up new opportunities for our organisation that we can take advantage of. So really when we're looking at this external environment, what we're doing is we're looking at what are the opportunities and what are the threats. So an opportunity is a condition in the general environment that if we exploit it might help us achieve strategic competitiveness, while a threat is something in the external environment that might hinder our ability to achieve strategic competitiveness. And these two elements go into what we call our SWOT analysis.